Hello and welcome to a special combined edition of Planet Waves TV and Starcast. Today's edition is for the 20th of February here early in Pisces season. And this edition accompanies the article about the Aries point and the being on the Pisces side of the Aries point that has gone out to Planet Waves subscribers. And the article became something a little bit other than I was suspecting, but that's what happens when a creative work has a life of its own. And it is always my intention as a creator to breathe life into the things that I create and then have them take on a life of their own. Usually that goes pretty well. Anyway, welcome. Good morning. I have some exciting, relevant, interesting, I think, information for you. And this develops a story that I have been working on for some time, and that is the Family Hunger Games cluster going on in Capricorn. Before I get too far into speaking, let's go to the chart cam for a visual on that. I know it's a little bit small, especially if you're on a phone. And I will hold the chart up in a second to show you what's going on there. It's missing the Pegasus stamp, but it's an authentic chart. I just cast it myself. So the Hunger Games cluster is this kind of really intense little compact cluster of minor planets going on in Capricorn. And it's centered at about Pholus, the centaur, kind of the leader of the pack, is at 11 degrees. Quaoar is at about 10 degrees, and then there's Ixion taking up the rear, and then in here is Cupido, a planet without a body. So this is a group that's going to be moving together in Capricorn basically for a heck of a long time, at least 10 more years. And I began to delineate that a year ago, so that's there. And then what I'm going to get into is the way that it's connecting to activity in Aries and in Libra and in Cancer, but mostly in Aries and Libra, the axis of relationships, All right, so back to me. So I began exploring this cluster in Capricorn about a year ago. I mean, I vividly remember the day. It was in room 23 of my favorite cheap motel up on Hunter Mountain. And I went out and took a break and took some photos of the Catskill waterfall. And I've included one of those. That was in the spring of 2024. And that was the one where I finally broke through on my question of how much alcohol is consumed on the planet. I was trying to think of what size lake would be the equivalent of the daily amount of liquor, wine, and beer, not counting mixers, consumed on the planet in a single day. And I got my answer in the form of how much is consumed in a year. And it turns out that in a year, there's enough liquor, wine, and beer consumed to fill the primary New York City reservoir, the Ashokan Reservoir, which contains 123 billion gallons of water. Now, there's other reservoirs in the system that feed the Ashokan, that collect it, but that was the Ashokan when it opened, I think, in 1912. That was the big deal. And the Ashokan contains 123 billions at maximum capacity. It's a river valley. It goes about 12 miles. It's a mile wide. At its widest, it's about 12 miles long. It takes a while to drive along Route 28A, but it's great fun. Maybe I'll do a video of a drive along Route 28A. That was the road created to kind of accommodate traffic on the south side of the reservoir. It tends to run east-west, and that's a lot of liquor, wine, and beer in a year. 111 billion gallons on the planet in a year. Think of all the grain fields. Most of that comes from grain. Some of it comes from grape. I've jokingly been referencing my bass player, producer, good friend Daniel Grimsland has a band called The Grape and the Grain. So we get grape and grain creating alcohol. That's Grimsland's joke. And That's Pholus. That is Pholus. And so we've got this planet here called Pholus. It's the second centaur discovered after Chiron. It's all about multi-generational issues involving alcohol, Pholus, and it is right here, and it's concentrated with other influences that describe family. Quaoar, I still don't know how to pronounce that in Tongva, is about family origins back to the beginning. Pholus goes back 3 generations. Cupido is family generations. You can't really see it so good, I realize. I'm sorry about that. Cupido is about family matters. Generally, it's a gathering point, usually considered positive, all things happy. Ixion is the stinker. It is the amoral influence. And we often find, I think, that this amoral influence can come from alcohol, where there is this toxin that suspends all morality, where it's like all bets are off. 3 shots of Jack Daniels and a person will walk up to someone at a bar and say, "You're looking at me funny," and clock him on the fucking head. Just now, it brings out another aspect of our being, and we all have a little bit of this. And no, I am not a teetotaler, but I try to keep my alcohol consumption down to like a drink or two a week, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think that people have drank as much in 1 month of their college career as I've drank in my entire lifetime. So I'm not especially worried about my alcohol consumption, and I'm fascinated by the culture. I used to be the senior editor of Kane's Beverage Week. Did you know that? Read by Seagram's executives and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Those were my first jobs. So I'm a real expert on liquor, wine, and beer, also called beverage alcohol. But I'm saying what I'm getting here is there is an issue, and the issue runs in families, and we know this. And I think that this massive, massive consumption, bars up and down the street, slightly less after COVID, but nonetheless, there's bars and bars. You go into any town and there's another bar and yet another one, yet another one, yet another one. There's alcohol flowing freely to the tune of 111 billion gallons a year. Billion gallons. Try to imagine that. You can visualize it with the photos of the Ashokan Reservoir. I haven't included one, but let me see if I can. Well, no, I included one of it frozen in the article. So now just extend that by, 12 miles and make it a mile or two wide and 200 feet deep, and you have a sense of how much liquor, wine, and beer that is. And this, I think, is really the thing that is focusing, that is entrenching the family patterns that we are seeing. That is the point of don't deal with it. That is the point of suppress the emotions. That is the major influence of emotional unavailability. Imagine if you just subtracted all of a sudden, one day, all of the Night Train, the craft bourbons, the Jack Daniels, the bottle after bottle after bottle after bottle after bottle of wine that is consumed. Many people have wine cellars at their house of some kind. Imagine that was all gone one day. Well, people would have to deal with their stuff. I mean, you could even have them you could even have them on, hold on, I have to message someone. 30 more minutes. Okay, even all the SSRIs in the world would not add up to all of this alcohol. And so what I'm getting at is that when we are looking at the multi-generational pattern of drama, I think that's really that is the cement that holds it together. I agree with John Bradshaw. I know people have issues with him, that what this does is it binds guilt and shame. It binds it, it solidifies it, it calcifies it, and it prevents coping, dealing with it, addressing with it, honestly approaching the situation. And what situation? Well, the situation of the multi-generational drama that we have all of us have inherited this. And it could be one great-grandparent who was the drunk in the family, and this wasn't even called alcoholism then. It was just like, I drank a lot. Now, why is this so interesting all of a sudden now? Like, and I know that I have not stopped going on and on and on and on about this for a year, but it's I think quite a discovery. And by the way, before I switch back to the chart cam, all of this is delineated in the minor planets. There's not, well, with the exception of Venus and the moon joining the escapades now, immediately, the entire pattern that I'm describing involves the minor points. Now, I lived in Paris for a while. I lived in Paris for 18 months. And I was just recently amused to hear Gene Shepard, my professor of radio, read an ad copy from some junk mail that he got back in the 1970s for erotica. Somebody was trying to pitch him high-priced erotica. And he said, imagine yourself in Paris, in one of the finest shops in Paris. Okay, let me tell you something. That's not where Paris is. Paris is not on the main drag. Paris is found in the back streets of the 5th, 6th, 7th arrondissements. You don't find anything interesting in the first arrondissement. There's nothing going on there. It's a bunch of freaking Bloomingdales. There's nothing, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I realize I'm a bit eccentric, but there's nothing interesting going on there. To find the interesting stuff, you have to go on to the back streets. And yes, you connect to the back streets where sometimes through, obviously you have to eventually get to a main thoroughfare, but when you get to the back streets, suddenly there are alleyways and passages. And then you find, like one night I found this really, really interesting bookshop that had the books stacked up to the ceiling, and it looked like it had never been organized. And I'm sure that the bookseller could find any book that you asked for in this place. And I'm pretty sure that this was the place where I looked up on one of the high shelves and saw the book of Andy Warhol's Polaroids. Andy Warhol's Polaroids. I'm thinking, Andy, who knew? Andy Warhol, I guess somebody knew. Andy Warhol's Polaroids. And I said, would you mind plucking that book down for me? And I'm looking at the book of Andy Warhol's Polaroids, and I thought, these are astonishing. And they're taking on a $20 camera. That's when I got a digital camera. All my gear had been destroyed in a flood in 1999. So I started over again in 2005. That's the kind of stuff you find in the back streets. And the back streets in astrology are the minor planets. You want to find out what's going on that's interesting, that gets you out, that gets you beyond the personality level. Let me see if I can get this any closer here. Beyond the outside of the doesn't really help that much, but whatever. Outside of the personality level, outside the the usual, what's going to happen. The minor planets, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, included in this pattern. No one who does not use the minor planets is going to see this. You can't see it. It's not there if you're not using the minor planets. This is why the minor planets are so important, because they're going to tell you stuff that is deeper. And what exactly is deeper? Well, let's talk about the Hunger Games cluster. I always indicate it in red in my charts, and then I indicate all the things talking to it that fill out the configuration in red also. So you can see that these are all functioning as one idea. That's what an aspect pattern is. It's a group of planets spread throughout the chart that function as one idea. And the idea, the root of the idea is the family Hunger Games, which we see in Capricorn. But once you look at the chart, once you put up what's called a 90-degree dial, this is from Serenu.com, and you get a little list of everything that sorts out, that shakes out in the degrees 9 through 11 of the cardinal signs. That's how I can see this aspect pattern. is that I take the chart for Venus stationing retrograde. That's the chart, ordinary chart. Everybody's looking at it. And then I take that chart, I put it into serennu.com, SERENNU.com. It's free, but subscribe, give her your money. I think she only takes at the most $10 a month or $1 a month, I think, at the minimum. You can say that I sent you. And then you see that there's this whole aspect pattern. So whereas most astrologers are seeing Venus retrograde, ooh, it's conjunct the moon. That's all they're getting. That's all they're seeing. Oh, it's kind of loose. Saturn is somewhere here. Mars is in the neighborhood. Okay. But now look, when you add this to it, we'll come back to this in a second, you see that there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 planets in the configuration. Well, how the hell do you read that? You read that because reading astrology, really reading astrology, is about reading the aspect pattern. And by the way, this is where I want my face seen saying this. This is where AI is a total fucking joke. It's where computer printout chart readings are a total joke, and where most other astrologers fall off the boat because it is very, let's say, I can show you how to do it. I'm showing you how to do it. But you have to be creative, you have to be imaginative, and you have to be curious about the human condition to be able to read an aspect pattern. It doesn't reveal its secrets easily. It doesn't just show up and say, hi, here's what I'm about. You can't look it up in any book. None of these things, none of these points are written about in books. There's a couple of articles on the web about Pholus, a couple about Quayar. I've written, I think, the best of them because I have this broadly circumspect view, and a lot of life experience that I bring to the table. Now let's get into that life experience. This pattern in Capricorn, which is all about the shit passed down from generation after generation in families, is talking to this point, which hardly anyone's ever heard of, called Salacia. I draw the symbol for Salacia thusly. There is no official astronomical symbol for it. So I give it the S combined with the elliptical orbit indicator of this little ellipse at the bottom. So any planet that I draw with an elliptical, and for that matter, Chiron and Pholus and Nessus, all have wildly elliptical orbits. By that, I mean the orbits are not so much, the sun's here, they're not so much a round orbit, which most of them, they're all ellipses. Kepler's law of planetary motion proved that point, solved a lot of problems. But there are some that are really elliptical. Hidalgo was the first one discovered, I think, in 1922 or something. Pluto discovered 1930. Now we find out Pluto is quite centaurish because it has this widely elliptical orbit. And that is true of Salacia. Wildly elliptical orbit, technically a Kuiper belt object orbit of about 250 years. And Salacia, I began delineating Salacia in 2020, and I won't get into how I got there, but my delineation of Salacia, which is here at 90 degrees, it's lined up with the moon and Venus, at 90 degrees to the family Hunger Games aspect, is about the sex that is appropriate for you. This is a big issue in our society. We are always told about the sex that is appropriate for someone else. We're always told what's appropriate to the family, which usually is designed. The family issues around sexuality, this I get from Wilhelm Reich, are not moralistic issues. The reason why the sex instincts in children are suppressed is to control the child's overall behavior and extinguish their curiosity. That's a manageable child. A child with no curiosity, who's not the least bit precocious in any way, who is dissuaded from self-discovery, that's a manageable child. And the way you do that is you cauterize their sexual instincts. You shut them down and you graft their sexual instinct, which every child has, onto anxiety. That's how we became who we are, because our society teaches parents to, if you want to control the kid, it's not a conscious process. shut them down sexually, and they'll be totally perfectly manageable. Everything will be fine. And they'll be screwed up a little or a lot. Sexual healing is undoing the screwed up, no pun intended, and all the subsequent aftermath that came from it. And so my take on Salacia, which is not expressed in any other planet, this is a very important thing where the minor planets are concerned, is that their delineation may include things that show up in other planets, but it should in no way be what is expressed by another planet. And for Salacia, my delineation is the sexual expression that is appropriate for you. If you're a woman who's into women, great. That's the sexual expression that's appropriate for you. But if you're a lesbian, perhaps some kind of a political lesbian, and you're curious about men, that's the sexual expression that is appropriate for you. You're primarily into women. You're curious about men. That kind of describes me too. And also, if all shades of any, I don't know if you've heard my rap on the Kinsey scale, but the Kinsey scale is like gayer than gay, straighter than straight. There's hardly anybody at gayer than gay and straighter than straight, and then 5 little bumps in between. Well, no, the Kinsey scale is not only a 360 scale. The Kinsey scale is 360 by 360, so that sexual orientation looks more like this. Where are we at today? It's this double compass that can point in any direction of space, which is the metaphor, not like, oh, I'm gayer than gay, oh, I'm straighter than straight. That really does not include anybody. And this like bit in the middle is like, come on. There's so many other possibilities. And my theory is that everyone has their own sexual orientation. But then we get the kind of sexual orientation du jour and by the way, I have some validation of how true my theory is, only because I've been experimenting with it for since the dinosaurs. But I wrote in the book associated with the awakening, the Awa, I took a chapter out of that book, I expanded it, and I brought it over to the LGBTQ Center, which is right on the side of the Lusco cave there. And the director was furious. I said, in this essay, look, nobody is LGBTQ unless you're Q, and Q stands for questioning. Nobody is really any of those things. They don't just really actually describe people, except in some very contained social and political sense. I identify as homosexual. I'm a straight man. Now, that ain't how it works in actual lived reality. But what we get then is Salacia. Here, imagine that. Isn't that pretty? Salacia is what I have delineated as the sexual, by which I mean sexual, emotional, relational. They're always on a continuum. Sexual, emotional, relational expression that is right for you. And look what happens. Let's get a close up here. That works pretty good. If I can figure out which way to move the pizza. So we have in this retrograde of Venus chart, here's where you can see Venus retrograde. Well, it's right in the little RX. See, this is the moment Venus stations retrograde. And by some coincidence, the moon, which could be anywhere, shows up right there, conjunct Venus, right for the show. This is the kind of synchronicity that makes you think, well, I really like astrology. How the hell does that happen? But it also happens to be happening right in front of Salacia. At 9:56, Venus is at 10:50. How do I do this? A little bit less close. I've got to hold the paper sideways for this. So what Venus retrograde actually is a triple conjunction of Moon, Venus, and Salacia. And then that whole shebang is square. It's very similar to a conjunction, but more powerful. It is square the family Hunger Games. So what I've been saying just about Salacia involved in the family Hunger Games is that this pattern describes, that square pattern describes the way in which the we say this the natural instincts in the person growing up who is powerless in the family structure, because you're thinking, if I don't sell these people some acceptable version of who I am, I'm going to be left at the steps of the orphanage or put in a basket and sent down the river like Moses, which probably didn't happen. To Moses anyway. Moses was probably one of the pharaohs, but let's not go there for now. So when you've got Salacia square the family Hunger Games pattern, you've got this scenario of how the family Hunger Games and all the sexual desperation, all the concealed sexual guilt, shame, embarrassment, assault, abuse, suppression, repression, depression, compression, all this going on in the family system conditions the kid. The kid who is blossoming as a human. All right, let's try again. Blossoming as a human, and then suddenly they're being hit with like ball-peen hammers in metal shop. We're going to shape this metal. We're going to sand this wood down. We're going to take off all the interesting things about you. We're going to call them splinters, and we're going to take off all the interesting things about you. And then a person enters the process of sexual maturity as an adolescent, going through all of that horror in junior high school with hormones surging, but they have been shaped and compressed by all of this freaking insanity of the multi-generational 111 billion gallons of liquor a year. It's freaking mind-boggling. Continuing. So let's just hold that as one thought. We've got this aspect pattern. The beauty of the aspect pattern is you hold it as one thought, and then you're like, what does that relate to? What story is this telling? And you have to be circumspect with astrology. If you're doing astrology right, again, I want you to see my face saying this. If you're doing astrology right, it compels you to be circumspect. It compels you to look around in every direction and to look up and down off of the ecliptic, which my friend Dennis is helping me do. Hello, Dennis. To get more into declinations and out-of-bound planets, and this is going to have a heck of a story in there that adds to it. But just looking at the circumspect part, looking around the wheel, what astrology compels you to do is to be circumspect. So therefore, you may not consider all 12 houses in one reading, but you're going to consider a bunch of them. You should definitely get the entire cross into the picture. This, by the way, is the cardinal cross. All right, so there we go. And it's not just Salacia anymore. Venus stations retrograde right on Salacia, and the moon shows up for the party. This is deep. This is quite a moment. And the moment of Venus stationing retrograde is like the exact location where Venus stations retrograde, in this case, 1050 of Aries, is unique to its time. Yeah, if you wanted to find another time Venus station retrograde there, you'd have to do kind of a multi-century search for that. So Venus at 1050 is relevant now. And what it's saying is we have to consider the whole thought, which is not just about going to the LGBTQ parade. Oh, great, my 7-year-old knows that men can be given boobs and wear a skirt and dance around on a truck, and that person used to be female, but she had her top surgery, chop them off. She'll never nurse a baby, even if she wakes up one day when she's 25 and she wants to. She cannot do it. That's wonderful. Problem solved. The kid knows what LGBTQ is. Don't we feel good about ourselves because we've given the kid the book about the Pride Parade? How about how we feel? How about something about prime sexuality, which is masturbation? Kids do this in the womb. Animals do it. Long before there's any notion of relationships, of morality, of basically the two things that sexuality gets caught in, there is self-existence in sexuality, and that is the first place that is attacked by families, by religious institutions, by relationships, by government propaganda, by medical propaganda. Self-sexuality is prime sexuality. If you want to get to the heart of the matter, if you're having sexual issues, you want to know what's going on, get rid of all the morality, forget about it, forget about what the partners and the parents and the government thinks, and go back to who you innately, inherently are. Go back to your first orgasm if you had it as a child, or your first sexual awakening that you had, and you will work with that. If it's an experience of transgression, an experience of abuse, which is possible, there is going to be rich healing information contained in that experience and your responses to it. All right, going on for a while here, let's just take a look at the other parts of this grand square. We have to stretch a little bit for the Cancer wing, but for the Libra wing, we have something very interesting showing up. We have Arachne. The glyph for Arachne is a spider's web. It looks like this. That's the glyph for Arachne. And I'm going to draw a very pretty version of it. It's kind of hard to get it small, but that's what it looks like. And it kind of looks like that when I draw it into the chart. And let's just go in close on that. Arachne, 1049, exactly opposite Venus at 1050. That's impressive. When you see an opposition to one arc minute, especially timed with a big thing like Venus retrograde, holy Moses. Arachne, what's Arachne? Well, Arachne is any form of a story. Think of the spider weaving its web, and the spider is the animal spirit of the writer. If you're followed around by spiders, they're telling you to write. That's what spiders tell you. If you creeped out, write even more, because they're sending you a message. But it's also about conspiracies, and conspiracies that move through networks, and the conspiracies, the stories that become conspiracies, and the way they move through networks. And this is going on in Libra, the sign of relationships. This is a very interesting development. It is also closely aligned with Makemake. Now, this is, if you read the Libra chapter in The Awakening, I give a long story. I delineate Makemake coherently for the first time. But let me tell you that I had a hard time learning this point. Makemake is the creation god of the Birdman cult on Rapa Nui, Easter Island, and it's a second generation religion for Easter Island. People in Easter Island, do I have my picture of the Moai up? No, I have, they're not there, it's not there anymore. Look up the Moai, the Moai. You'll recognize the statues from Easter Island. Well, the people who knocked them down were the people who had the new god, Makemake, who is the creative god of the Birdman cult. And I've been working on this one for 20 years. Some of these things say they yield their secrets to me much easier. Makemake. So I delineate it once I've been delineating it over the years, and then I get it to a juicy one in Libra. Then I made another discovery. I partly made the discovery because lately I have been very into the Lascaux Cave, the oldest record of humanity, approximately 20,000 years ago in a cave in southern France, found by a dog named Robot. A tree fell over, left a hole in the ground. The hole in the ground went down to a cave system that for 20,000 years had been sealed. and it's the oldest record of human existence. I am particularly in love with the hands. They do not depict humans that I know of. I just ordered a book of them. But humans are depicted as their hands. Talk about Chiron, which means one who has hands. However, among the images in this cave are images of a birdman. And we find the birdman in at least 3 places. We find it in ancient Egypt, we find it on Rapa Nui, and we find it in the Lascaux cave. You could not have 3 more far-flung places than those 3 places to find the same thing symbolized. I promise you, the people in southern France were not talking to the people on Easter Island. No way. That tells me that the Birdman is real. That somehow some space alien that looks like a Birdman showed up. Well, what's going on with that? I don't know. Maybe you will be able to intuitively fit that in. I don't ever try to force it into the story, but we're going to have it there. But it says very old. And I would say the thing that seems new, but that is really very old. Last corner of this Grand Cross. Siwa shows up, the asteroid Siwa. The glyph is approximately this. I think it's like 1 up and 2 down. And it's about listening. It's about sound. It's about hearing, and it's about listening. Siwa. There's also Siva. This is short for Shiva. I'm not sure how Martha Westcott got to this, but I sometimes start my delineations using Martha Westcott's delineation. She's very good. She's very efficient. And one cool thing about Martha is that she constantly morphs the delineation so that it's alive. If you read her work over a 10, 15-year period, you'll see she's given 50 similar delineations of the same point. The book to start with is Mechanics of the Future from Treehouse Mountain, Mechanics of the Future by Martha Westcott. It is not one of these cluttered, overly serious, stuffy kind of, I'm a serious astrologer. Martha is an outside artist in astrology. She's not invited to speak at conferences. She's one of the most brilliant astrologers, and I'm happy to say taught me a lot of astrology, particularly in the early days and in some more recent conversations. Anyway, she says sound. Siva is what you can hear. So we have quite this combination. The list is here. I will stick it above the horoscope, the monthly horoscope. All right. That is what I've got for you today. What is my sum total interpretation? Pay attention. This comes down to a Venus retrograde conjunct Venus station retrograde in Aries, the sign of self-actualization, of becoming, of discovering who you are, which is constantly being packed over by moralistic and religious and digital and horseshit dogma packed on you, and everybody's competing to convince you of who you are. That's all advertising, all religion, all the entire digital network is competing to convince you of who you are, which is driving you out of your body. So this to me is saying, well, this is a tremendous moment of self-discovery. This is what the awakening is about, by the way. The absolutely spectacular 2025 annual edition of Planet Waves. Most of you have not availed yourself of this. We know how many we've sold. We know how many subscribers we have. Most of you have not availed yourself of this. It is affordable. It is absolutely brilliant. It is my best work. And it comes with a book, a 65-page, short enough, printable book called The Awa. And we will include, everywhere you see this, we will put something that points to it. But the way to get there is the Astrology Boutique, astrology.boutique. We'll make a shortcut to that, but that's what it's called, astrology.boutique. All of my readings are there. What I do in my readings is I take this astrology and I personalize it for your sign and your rising sign. And that gets you a long way toward a chart reading, because I am so good at this. I'm so dedicated. I've been doing this every day since 1994, waking up and doing astrology for 30 years. I would be Mozart if I spent that much time on that piano. So thank you for checking that out. Again, astrology.boutique, Pisces reading finished last night, Aquarius reading hot and still hot and ready. These are separate series. The studio readings are a different series. There's ways to get all of this inexpensively. Write to us at cs@planetwaves.net, and we will bring you into the fold. This is a boutique operation. This is not some mass-produced operation with AI and charts being churned out by computer databases. Either me or Eli see, feel, and talk to every single customer of Planet Waves. As I say in my emails, thank you for your business and your trust. Signing off for today. Happy Pisces. Lots of love. And bye for now. That's how I greet dogs, by the way.